From the heartland of America and the gateway to the West, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie, and this is Coast to Coast AM. Later tonight, the mystery of dreams. And welcome back, affiliates WAAM Radio, AM 1600, and FM 92.7, Ann Arbor, southeastern Michigan's conservative flamethrower. Great to be back with you. Here's what's happening. Ukraine's President Zelensky said Russia was planning to call up more troops for a major new offensive. It doesn't stop, even as Moscow was facing some of its biggest internal criticism of the war over a strike that killed scores of fresh conscript soldiers from Russia. Federal Reserve officials reaffirmed their commitment to fighting inflation at their December meeting and indicated that interest rates could remain elevated for some time until there is clear evidence that consumer prices are falling. Investment advisor Mish Sedlock with us. Mish, no end in sight yet.
No end in sight, George. Actually, this was kind of a bombshell today. The minutes of the meeting in December, the Fed is concerned over misperceptions, their words, that the market would not understand its message, and that would complicate their efforts to restore price stability. Meanwhile, regarding recession, they said one risk was that restrictive monetary policy, if they were insufficient, that it would cause inflation to soar. The other risk was that if they didn't do enough, that it would cause a recession. They went on to say that inflation risks were skewed to the upside, the economy to the downside. Meanwhile, they're also concerned over stretched budgets. We've seen a lot of that lately. There have been reports recently that nearly half of millennials said they're borrowing money from their parents and their friends just to make ends meet. The Fed is concerned over tight labor markets and wage growth. Then they mentioned something about jobs that I've been harping about for the last 5 months. I was actually sort of pleased, but yet at the same time disappointed that they picked up on this. They noted that the Bureau of Labor Statistics Household Survey and the quarterly census of employment and wages were divergent, and that the latter says that employment may have been weaker than indicated by the payroll employment. George, you know I've kind of doubted these job reports for some time.
You sure have.
Add it all up. And the other news of the today was the ISM manufacturing came out, signaling recession for the first time in 30 months, and this is global. Yesterday we saw the global manufacturing PMI also indicating recession. Meanwhile, the Fed's message is clear, returning to the main story. The Fed is concerned over wage growth, persistent inflation, more so than recession or stretched budgets. Housing has collapsed. Manufacturing has collapsed. George, Happy New Year. Good luck.
Thanks a lot. Very enlightening conversation, Miss. Thank you. Sad story out of Vietnam. Vietnamese authorities announced that the 10-year-old boy trapped on a 115-foot deep concrete hole since New Year's Eve is dead. The boy initially was heard crying for help when he slipped through a 10-inch diameter shaft at a bridge construction site while searching for scrap metal with friends. Sad story there. There's one more reason to limit the amount of time your child is spending in front of a screen. Social media could be reprogramming children's brains and making them hooked on likes, and a new study out of the University of North Carolina reveals all this. Howard Bloom, the author of The Global Brain, with us now. Too much, Howard, too much.
Well, here's the deal. Today, a new study on teens and social media hit the headlines in places like StudyFinds.org and the New York Times. The headline in StudyFinds was scary. It warned of a social disaster, and it explained that children who frequently check social media face significant brain changes. But the headline was wrong. It misinterpreted the facts. Here's the story. Roughly 3 years ago, 7 researchers from the Department of Psychology and Neuroscience at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill began what they called a 3-year longitudinal cohort study among 6th and 7th grade students recruited from 3 public middle schools in rural North Carolina. There were 169 students involved. When those students were 12, the researchers asked them to describe their use of social media, specifically their use of Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Some of these 12-year-old students check their social media 15 times or more a day, others between 1 and 14 times, and yet others less than once a day. Once a year, the researchers engaged the students in a video game where the rewards and punishments were pictures of teenagers smiling or looking angry. While the students played the game, the researchers took pictures of their brains using fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging. Over 3 years, the brains of the students who used social media more than 15 times a day became different than the brains of the students who used social media once a day or less. But there's a problem. Adolescence is a time of dramatic brain change, and it's a time when brain differences naturally increase. So any changes you see could simply be a natural part of growing up. Was social media actually warping the brain, or were students with different types of brains more attracted to social media? The study does not answer that question. As Jeff Hancock, the founding director of the Stanford Social Media Lab, said, the study may simply have been picking up on the brain development of characteristics like extroversion. In other words, the odds are good that extroverts are more attracted to heavy use of social media. Or as the University of North Carolina's Eva Tetzer, one of the authors of the new study, confesses, we can't make causal claims that social media is changing the brain. Another 6-month-old study gives a very different perspective. It comes from a survey of 1,316 teens performed in the spring of 2022 by the high-prestige Pew Research Center. The Pew survey suggests that social media use is an enormous positive for teens. According to Pew, 80% of teens say that social media makes them feel more connected to what's going on in their friends' lives. 71% say that social media gives them a place where they can show their creative side. 67% say that social media gives them people who can support them through tough times. And 58% say that social media makes them feel more accepted. The teen years are all about separating from your parents, making friends, finding the groups of people your age with whom you belong, and trying to fit into those groups. Finding a group that accepts you and attaching to friends is vital to your mental health, and it's powered by changes in your brain. Pew shows that social media helps kids find their tribe, and the Mayo Clinic says that social media allows teens to create online identities, communicate with others, and build social networks. In other words, social media may not be a brain destroyer, and I suspect it is a brain enhancer.
Howard, you've hit it right on the head once again, my friend. Thank you. Folks, just back off social media for your kids. Just don't let them do it as much as they have been. Nostradamus, who was born in the 1500s in France, what does he have to say about 2023? Up next, John Hogue, the expert on prophecy. He's next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. John Hogue back with us. Writes on the subjects of the occult, pure psychology, mysticism, and prophecy. Considered a world authority on Nostradamus. Best-selling author as well. His work has brought him international acclaim. He's been published in at least 18 languages, has appeared on hundreds and hundreds of radio and television shows. John also has John Hogue's Prophecy e-magazine. We'll tell you how you can subscribe to that in a moment. John, welcome back, and happy 2023.
Hey, George. It's good to be with you in the new year and everybody out there in Radio Land.
We're going to talk about the prophecy of you and the prophecy of Nostradamus tonight. Are you ready for all that?
Yes, I'm thinking I'm going to try a new way. There's so much to cover. I think I'm going to just do declarative one after the other.
Tell us a little bit about Nostradamus. He was in the 1500s. So how did he get this gift of prophecy?
He said it was hereditary, but his gift would die with him. He was born in 1503, and he was a physician, apothecary, and then was noted for fighting the plagues in the 1540s in Aix-en-Provence, Salon, and Lyon in South France. He wrote about it. It's quite remarkable account of his fighting the plague. then 10 years later, well, in the next decade, he semi-retired in the 1550s and began to work on what he'd been collecting, magical tools. Some of them in his 2 trips to Florence, he had acquired from Florence at the high Renaissance period. And then he started to write his almanacs in 1549. So the first one came out in 1550, and they went out all the way to 1567. And, of course, we most know him for his magnum opus, Les Prophéties, which was the 942 surviving quatrains of a 1,000 four-line verses that were supposed to predict the future of history up to the year 3797 and beyond.
Was he an astrologer as well, John?
Yes, he was an astrologer. Probably that's why he went for healing as a profession, because astrology was kind of frowned upon during the times of the Roman Inquisition. But it was tolerated in doctors, and it was also tolerated that a lot of Christian doctors were probably Jews who had converted. So it was a way to be a Jew in a Christian world, and his whole family converted before he was born because they didn't want to be kicked out of lovely Provence when the King of France took over, when the King of Provence died.
Now, did he make anything prophetic for 2023 specifically, or is it just general?
I think it's more general. Certainly, he is certainly somebody who is one of the prophets that saw 3 world wars, not just 2. And I think we're actually in a very strange hybrid situation. I've been trying to figure out how to define this new Cold War, which, by the way, he saw it coming. When it would start, it would be 3 years and 7 months long, or 13 years long before it went hot. And the prophecies are about 2 great eagle kings, the Aquilonaires. And they're the kings of the north, the great brothers of the north who are not yet brothers. They kind of became friends, and both countries, he said, would exceed and grow, which is interesting because America, of course, became a unipolar superpower. But Russia, in its first decade after the war, was on its knees. But actually, it also implies that the other eagle, the double-headed eagle, also became new and more powerful and came back into being a world-influencing power. So the double-headed eagle and the bald eagle started to have their Thucydides trap, which is what happened to the Athenians and the Spartans when a new empire comes up, like the British Empire was dealing with the German Empire in World War I, where a new empire is on the scene, like China, and America is dealing with China's rise, and it often leads to blows rather than a tolerating coexistence. And so we're definitely in a strange meeting we're in a proxy world war. It's conventional right now. We're in a economic sanction world war. And it is that front actually exploded back on the West. And even though, the first thing to fall in the war, whatever kind, is truth, and the war of propaganda that the West is buying into its own propaganda is remarkable to anyone who actually tunes in the rest of the world and doesn't watch Fox and CNN and MSNBC and all those media networks. You'll find the whole world is in a whole different place, and much of it is abandoning the U.S. dollar because the shock that went over the world when the sanctions from the EU leadership and America to freeze the foreign assets of the Russian Federation has never been done before. It's the biggest bank heist in history. And
they took the money, didn't they?
they're trying. They're trying to find a legal way to make legal what is a crime. And we may kind of not know about that, but I mean, even Zimbabwe and other countries in Africa and the southern global south, even in Asia, even in South America, everybody's saying, well, if they can do that to Russia, a G20 country, what's stopping them from doing it to me? And so what is happening is, you're going to see it in 2023, a shift of much of the world away from what I will call the collective West. Literally 2/3 of the planet will be drawing quietly away from the United States. I mean, this act at the opening of this war, in one fell swoop, ended the United States' 32 years of unipolarity.
Now, is this John Hogue prophecy, or is this John Hogue knowing current events?
This is both, because that's how I read the world. I know current events. It's how I read people privately. When I came back from reading Just the World for 26 years and came back to reading people one-on-one on Zoom, I usually have to tell them, look, I'm not Zelda, the fortune teller, and we play the guessing game. I want you.
You're not in a little machine by a carnival or anything like that.
Yeah, you gotta. I say I gotta bring the client out and start talking about themselves, and this is like how I watch the world talking about itself and doing its stuff, and then that's when the oracular event starts happening. I see what trends are working and what trends are going nowhere, and it just pops in there. So that's how I read the world and how I read people individually. Where
did you get your prophetic gift, John? How did that come?
Well, I kind of both sides of the family had a bit of that going on, but the most powerful source was my paternal grandmother. She didn't talk about it much because most of what she saw was bad things. But I'll never forget the time she told my father, and says, well, you're going to meet a girl. She's going to wear a green polka dot dress, and it'll be on 25th Street in Mandan, North Dakota. That's where they lived. And she's going to say this to you. So, several days later, all that happened out of the blue. So,
and here are you. That's right.
So that's kind of part of where it comes from. But I think it has a lot of karmic past life sources as well.
When you look at 2023 overall, John, just an overall look at this year, does it feel good to you?
Well, I have no hope for it, and therefore I have no hopelessness. See, the issue of is it good, is it bad, is it going to be a good year or a bad year, understandable questions. But from a deeper level of witnessing the world, it is what mystics will call the horizontal approach, where you're in a line, which is your life, and you're in this world where horizontally you're always kind of having to choose between good or bad, right or wrong, polarities. But if everyone has this ability to be the mystical, to be outside or free of that horizontal trap, or what they call in Eastern religions the wheel of samsara, where every life you just go spinning around, doing the same thing, getting young, getting old, and coming back, getting young, getting old, coming back. And there comes a point where a person seeks a way to not be a part of it, but also not to fight it, because to fight it is to be a part of it. Again, if I'm fighting against something, I am feeding the horizontal reality. So the mystic learns to become a witness, and in the process of simply engage totally in life, not escaping life. I mean, this is what I do, and I'm not escaping life, but it changes the way you live it when you simply find something in you that never changes. There is in every one of us. It's what used to be called the Buddha mind by Buddha, and it simply means where other minds, the false mind of the ego and personality, is constantly bouncing off the walls and wanting this and hating that and comparing itself with others and countries comparing themselves with other countries. But the Buddha mind never changes.
John, we're going to come back in a moment and talk more about prophecy on Coast to Coast AM. Prophecy expert John Hogue with us. We're going to take calls with John next hour here on Coast to Coast. His website is linked up at coasttocoastam.com. And we'll be back in a moment and tell you how you can pick up his e-magazine also on Coast to Coast. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie along with John Hogue. John, how do people get your Prophecy e-magazine?
Well, you can get it by going to hogueprophecy.com, which is linked up right now to Coast. You just you'll see that the article wave that's there. You'll see a green eye icon right near the beginning of the text, and there'll be a little link there that for $60 for 12 months. That's $5 a month. You get a fully illustrated magazine, electronic magazine that I write myself, which is about sometimes the size of Time magazine, every 2 months.
Good for you.
I give some free. You can sample the free articles at Hogue Prophecy right now, and if you, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. And because of the controversial nature of my work, I actually send this as a PDF file on your email that you send to do the donation. So that way, my free speech and your freedom to read me is not
compromised,
disturbed by the ways in which things are happening with censorship, which brings me to a topic that is one of the good news things about 2023. For about 20 years, I've been saying that you can't really, the way things are set up, it's almost set up for the masses to fail in trying to fix this problem of the overlords, the 1%, trying to make us the feudal overwhelmed. But I once had a vision that it would happen if people within that 1% began to wake up to it, what they're doing, and started to use their power and influence as a catalyst for all of us to start changing things. And I would say now the first trillionaire, billionaire that's out there now that's doing that is Elon Musk. He is fulfilling that prophecy. He's the beginning of it. I mean, the way he is, my Twitter account since 2014, I haven't been able to access all my thousands of Twitter people there because I was reporting on the NAZIS problem in Ukraine back in 2014. Now one day suddenly I could access everybody again. So
it just started working again, huh?
Yeah, it started working again because I wasn't even aware. I thought there was some glitch, but they were disconnecting me from my community. So this is the beginning, and what Taibbi and Musk are doing, the reporter, are proving, documenting the abuse of government in the First Amendment, which makes them unable to do what they're doing. The FBI can't have a little office in Twitter, in Facebook, I'm sure it's there, in Google, and all these places telling them what to do, what to think, who to ban and who not to. The elections have been altered, and now all this proof is coming out. There was an artificial Russiagate that's finally being proved. Oodles and oodles of evidence is now coming out. And that is thanks to Elon Musk, a person who's one of the overlords, saying, I don't like the way the social communications are being controlled.
So he's going to go spend $44 billion to do it, and look where he is now.
Yeah, so I call, among others that feel this way, who are also, now some of the others aren't. Certainly the man who owns Washington Post and is very much in the pockets of the CIA. But there are those. And strangely enough, in some respects, Trump is also one of those rebellious one percenters, and that's what makes him so frightening to those the kings and queens in their palaces in the neo-feudalist 21st century, who see him as this populist, as a threat. And even in history, there's parallels before that. It's usually the people in the power elites that start something, and then the people have a chance. So I'm very much in favor of what he's doing.
And I've got to ask you, you've had 3 great premonitions about the future that you say have changed your life, but you're in the midst of a 4th one. Can you share that with us at this time?
Yes, the backstory of it is that I've had 3 major premonitions in my life that I talked about, a very personal story, in a book called Nostradamus, Premonitions of 911. And the first was, before my 7th birthday, I had a very powerful premonition that the world was just about to be destroyed. This was October 1962. And so I talk about how I kind of saw the Cuban Missile Crisis, what I later found out as this little kid, what it was. And actually, because of the shock of that, in fact, my birthday would have been the first day of World War III if it hadn't been resolved.
Wow.
At 7. That was when I began to be a news junkie. As a 7-year-old kid, I wanted to know what was going on in the world. Even if I couldn't stop it, I would not want to die in it, ignorant of why it happened. So that was the first premonition. The second premonition was a very powerful premonition I had 40 minutes before I was in an auto accident that in Long Beach, California, when I was T-boned 55 miles an hour by a guy running through a red light. And they gave me up for dead. We're working on the other guy. And because they didn't know I was a yogi and doing a lot of, I'm very double-jointed. My neck was way over, so everybody thought probably the hit. And I was very pale. They thought, well, his neck was snapped. It will work on this guy.
He's dead, yeah.
And then 20 minutes later, I kind of rose from the dead. I kind of looked around. Everybody was like going, oh, my God, he's not dead. And so then what happened is that I had an out-of-body experience, which is detailed in this, which I was given a choice in this infinite goldenness that I had been hurled into, where people were not varying and doing it perfectly, that messages were received that were never uttered by people who did not exist in form and yet perfectly communed. It's very strange to use. See, I'm using the horizontal language to describe what I was trying to describe earlier.
Right. And this is premonition number 2?
That was number 2. The third was started after my last trip to India, and it started to build and build from March 2001 to September 10th, 2001, to where it was just unbelievably big. And it was the culmination of things I had been doing since 1983, which was constantly going back to Nostradamus' prophecies about the hollow mountains of the new city. And the book shows how the interpretation evolved as I got better understanding of, as it was coming closer, what it was. It talks about the times I was talking to Hans Holzer, the famous psychic detective in New York, and he was asking me, he said, all my psychics are saying that this is going to be another attack, and should we leave New York City? And I said, and then this voice kind of came out, and he said, no, but don't go down to the Battery, the tip of Manhattan. That place is doomed. And I just kind of watched myself say that. It was like, whoa, what's that about? But I had shortly after that, I did a national show called Prophecies of the Millennium for Fox Networks. And in it, we were asked the question, will the Twin Towers be attacked again? And I said yes. And inspired by what I told them, the Twin Towers are actually shown falling from an explosion.
Wow.
And that was broadcast across the United States in March of 1996. And then it was broadcast again just by chance 2 weeks before 9/11 happened. And so that was a huge change in my life, for all of our lives, but it also kind of catapulted me to a larger global interest, because I had documented this journey with my readers and my community. So that was the third, but now I'm in the fourth, And the fourth.
And did they come to you as a dream, or how does it come to you?
They simply come. I don't covet them. I'm neither for or against them. I am just in the here now, and whatever happens, I witness it. And then this very subtle feeling. It does not have the terror and the premonition. It doesn't have the identification with what may happen next, like the others did. I mean, the most terrifying one was the one when I was nearly 7. The car, I was a little more distant from identifying with dying and things like that. And then the third, same. But this one has no. That's why I said earlier, I have no hope about the future, and I also, therefore, have no hopelessness. I neither am bound by hope or hopelessness about what is happening. I've come to accept that if this is, we are so close to danger with this war. You know, it's literally, at least the Russians understand that NATO is fighting them through Ukraine. And the fact that when Ukraine, probably after Greek-Russian Christmas, which is Saturday.
This Saturday?
Saturday is the 7th of January, which is for Greek Orthodox and Russian Orthodox Christmas. After the holidays, which started with New Year's, ends, then you're going to, probably as soon as later next week, no later than February 1st, the Russian steamroller will start rolling.
And this is premonition 4?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the danger is that we're going into uncharted water, where in the last Cold War we used to get to a certain point we never crossed. But this generation, since the first Cold War, have lost, it's what Merlin said in the Excalibur, it's quite true, for it is the doom of men that they forget. People have forgotten why you should not use nukes. Now, good news is the Chinese and Russians have not forgotten. They are not historically illiterate like us, willfully illiterate like us, trained to be illiterate like us. The Russians and the Chinese are not that way. They get the august responsibility of nuclear weapons. They will not use them first. That is pure mirroring of
Well, I was going to say, why do they say that they are threatening? You've got that. You've got that Russian guy named Laranov who threatens nukes if provoked.
For one thing, I would just tell everybody, if you want to know what they're actually saying, watch. RT is still in existence. You can still see the Russian stuff. You can still go to Kremlin RU and actually read the translations that are accurate of what they said. You can actually see all on videos, all that kind of stuff. If I can watch it, everybody else can, and it's completely different reality. This is what's so dangerous. In the West, you're all running on assumptions that are completely false. That's why it's so dangerous. That's what Stormberger was talking about in his World War III prophecies when he said, with open eyes will the people of the world walk into this catastrophe. It's because we have been made ignorant and disconnected with fact. And there's so much of that going on about Russia and China, about Putin, and it's most of it's just made up. I mean, in the Kremlin, they're just shaking their head like, these people have lost it. They've lost it. That's what makes them so dangerous. So there's a danger that when the Ukrainian army collapses, which it will in the next few weeks or months, it's losing 2 battalions a day. At that rate, the 200,000 still standing and still operating Ukrainian army will, in 4 months, cease to exist. So before that happens, though, the other thing is that there's, from what I'm seeing from the ground in Russia, there's a vast array of conventional weapons and soldiers coming. And
as a matter of fact, Zelensky said today he thinks that's happening.
Well, I heard that communique. They're not talking about. Zelensky is starting to talk about. I think he's losing his marbles a little bit. I think a little too much. He's got a coke addict problem, and I've seen it. I've seen him snort him.
Really?
So he's a little addled in his head. He's probably going to be overthrown by Zelensky, the general, because it's kind of looking like they're kind of getting him ready to be the next leader. And actually, Ukraine may do better with him. Zelensky once reported just recently that we just erase all corruption like that in Ukraine, which is crazy. It's not true. And then he said, we are already advancing on Crimea. We are already doing it in our heads. He's losing it. He's just losing it. And the other irony is that in the Ukrainian flag, which had all the signatures of the soldiers that the Speaker of the House, the former Speaker of the House, and the Vice President held up on the podium there, it's amazing how there were actually SS symbols on it. It's like I'm laughing, but it's tragic. I mean, how SS symbols on a Ukrainian flag draped over the congressional, post, the pulpit.
Hold on for a second, John. We're at the top of the hour already. We'll come back and talk more about some of the prophecies you see, and we'll take phone calls just ahead. And we'll be back in a moment with John Hogue as we talk about his prophecies, who so far hasn't painted a rosy picture of 2023. We'll also take your calls this hour on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you, along with John Hogue, and your calls this hour. John, paint us a good picture for 23. There's got to be something good out there.
Well, there's a lot of change, and that ultimately can be good. But it's so difficult to explain in the short time that I have to talk about these deep subjects. But we're living in revolutionary times. So the way to make it a good experience is to take it in a different way than the way we've been programmed to take all of this, as a right or wrong, happy, sad, this or that. Take it from a more centered consciousness. I've been saying on this show for years now that these times of the 2020 would be roaring. They would be a lot of things changing, as much as 20 centuries of changing in just 20 years, 20 months. And that, I can't, I'd love to patch the Titanic, but there's a hole in it.
Yeah, exactly. Raise that ship, right?
Yeah, so now it's a question of how you survive it, how you adapt to it, how you learn from it. We are heading towards uncharted waters where once the Ukrainian army starts collapsing, the question then will be the big temptation. Do the people in the Western leadership who've been trying to talk themselves into using a few nuclear weapons and blaming it on Russia, are they going to actually do it? When the Ukrainians have given up the ghost as an army, are they going to throw in the Poles? There's 200,000 Poles who are mobilizing. Now, there's three possibilities. There's a lot of people being mobilized who are social servants, doctors, firemen, stuff like that. Long story short, it looks like they're going to take back Western Ukraine, which was once called Galicia, part of Poland. Since 1939, it's been part of Soviet Union and then Russia. Now, Vladimir Putin and the Russians have clearly stated openly that they have no interest in Western Ukraine. So I think that was it's not a part of the Novi Russia area that they have 300 years of association with. It's too far east, and it really isn't a part of Russia. So it's likely, if the Poles play it right, they'll get it peacefully. And the Russians will be fine to hand them the center of all the NAZI goose-stepping, you-know-what, going on in Ukraine, which I've been talking on your show since 2014 about. They can make it Banderistan, the leader of during the Nazi period, that was the head of all that. And there's a real Nazi problem, and it's now going to be Poland's problem. If they want to do that, that could split NATO and the EU. And it may very well, this year, we may very well see the EU collapse as an alliance, NATO collapsing as an alliance, not just the deindustrialization of Europe.
And they may not be a strong alliance anyway.
Well, they're not. There's a very interesting Nostradamus prophecy where its indexing looks for the year 2022 as the beginning of the end of NATO, which it calls Dartan, which is a simple anagram for NATO. And it's going to fold up its flag. And of course, if NATO can't keep expanding, now that it's up to Russia's border, it's reached that point where it's a potentially kinetic war. It is a kinetic war, where you throwing the Ukrainian army into the wood chipper, basically. That's where it gets dangerous, because the head general secretary of NATO has more than once mused openly about, since we don't have the conventional power the Russians have to match them conventionally, why not just jump from level 1 to 10 and drop a nuke on the gathering forces of Russia? He said that. And you won't hear that in the news, but in this Hogue Prophecy magazine, you'll get it, and you'll get the sources, you'll see it.
That's pretty dangerous, John.
So my job, it's a shame that I have to frighten people, but we're in a problem here. We are walking blind into a catastrophe that could end civilization because our leaders are just sending us with our eyes wide shut to the reality. And so in the next 2 months, this is, Titanic's got a hole in it. And it could very well be that we will see the first nukes used since Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Are these things that will be or could be?
Well, they could be if we keep acting stupid. They don't have to be if we wake up. So, this is the conundrum. People kind of wait for the future to happen to them. They don't understand that they're giving birth to it. And often in my writings, that's what I'm trying to explain in detail, why this is happening and how people can stop being on that horizontal, unconscious zombie life from one end of the stick to the other, and then start all over again and do the same wheel of round the life and not live with consciousness, not live a living life. I mean, it is very much the problem, is that people are kind of feel disassociated with the cause and effect of their actions. They think, Mr. Hogue, tell me the Titanic isn't going to sink. Well, it is sinking. I'm sorry. Now it's a question of how you adapt to the changes that's going to bring to your life.
And whether you're going to find that lifeboat or not.
Yeah, and you find a lifeboat. You make, this is, we are going to see, Europe will survive the winter that it's in now. But it's going to emerge in the spring with no energy. And the LNG will not suffice to sustain it. So I talk about, as the cold winter of being, Europe's going to end up in the spring of, the thin spring, I call it. And then what's going on economically in Europe, which is going to reach our shores by the autumn. So that's the fall. And then there's just anything good about this is that the more Europe is being destroyed by its own leadership's moves, I hope this will be the time when the European people say, enough.
Wake up call? And
you will, if they do, then a lot of it's very simple. Just admit that the U.S. blew up the pipeline cut Germany and Europe off from its fuel to keep it ground down. And then if the Europeans say, okay, enough of this, we're going to start negotiating. The Russians want to negotiate.
Now, why do you think we blew it up?
Go ahead.
Why do you think we blew up the pipeline?
Well, it's simple. It's the old adage. It's been there since NATO was created.
True.
It's a rather cynical adage. Is keep America in Europe, keep the Germans down, suppressed in Europe, and keep the Russians out. And that's a very common thing, and it's still happening. I mean, basically, the Germans were about to, because they're destroying their economy. They are literally switching off the lights of the German economy. The fourth or fifth largest economy in the world is literally from its own sanctions cut itself off from the cheap and affordable fuel that ran it, Russian gas, Russian natural gas and oil. And so when the people were starting to rise in the streets in Germany, which wasn't reported in the West, but I'll show you in Hogue Prophecy, there they were. The next day after that big demonstration, the pipelines were blown. I also show in Hogue Prophecy all the satellite shots of the Kearsarge and two other naval ships, the helicopters that had a radar signature flying up and down the pipe, all when that happened, all U.S. Navy. And it's something just out there. It's like it's one of these magazines. The source is Moon of Alabama, a very good source of mine, who just showed, it's just a naval magazine just telling all the folks at home what your sons and daughters are doing in whatever region of naval patrols are going. And so they were just blithely, oh, and yes, there's all this deep water stuff, experiments going on. It's the second or third time that happened right over that same area where the 4 explosions happened. Now, who gains from this? America gains from it. America keeps Germany down. Germany was about to break out of the alliance. Now they can't do anything. The rope, if you call the pipeline the rope that they could grab to salvage their economy, the United States blew it to bits. What happens when that pipeline gets fixed? Well, it can get fixed. There are already reports from coming out now that there's no evidence the Russians blew it up. Frankly, it's too far away from them. And why would they blow it up? You just have to turn off the valve in St. Petersburg. You don't have to blow up a $800 million project that you put $800 million in. I mean, folks, start thinking. This is so obvious. And so, that's how you keep Germany down and Russia out of Europe. And this is how you keep the European Union, which was always a construct to make it kind of like what the Soviet Union had with Eastern Europe, a satellite of the United States hegemonic power. And right in the middle of all this, John, where's the Antichrist with all this stuff? Well, the Antichrist may very well be. Now, it's interesting about Antichrist. Some of them are real, obviously evil people like Hitler, and that was one of Nostradamus' Antichrist. His first Antichrist was Napoleon. Now, Napoleon actually did a lot of very good things, as well as a lot of very dumb things. So he was kind of a mixed bag. Now, I'm wondering, it's very interesting because the person that has the most possibility of being the third Antichrist, and since I've been on the trail of the Antichrist since 1983, you have been. That's true. Is the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. He, of all the other candidates I've been looking at, he's the first one who actually has global power influence. And his initials are almost like Mabus, right? Well, MBS. Nostradamus often drops the vowels and leaves the consonants. I remember we broke one of those about Morton Thiokol on one of our live shows, where we found out that you could put the vowels back, and there was the company that made the O-rings that made the Challenger blow up in space. Now, this is another one of those word plays. MBS is missing its two vowels, the A and the U. M-A-B-U-S, Mabus. Mabus is the code name for the third Antichrist. You might be right on that one. Well, it could be, and
it's weird.
It also in all the other laws of anagram that Nostradamus has used, Salman and bin Salman and Mohammed, his name, that makes the MBS, they all do the same code breakdown to Mabus. So he's got them both sparking on this. Now, and here's the thing that makes him a huge world changer. He reacted to the freezing of all the $300 billion of the Russians. In this way, he started turning the petrodollar into money for the Chinese. Because he said, these people, if they can do that to Russia, they can do that to me. And so he has moved Saudi Arabia, and he's got a lot of support of the 3,000 princes. And this is the real axis shift tipper, is Saudi Arabia is now moving away from buying U.S. bonds. That's how it's kept the U.S. economy going. That's what the commodity of Saudi oil has been doing since 1971. And for the first time, he's buying yuan, renminbi, rubles. And he's going to move what was once what fueled the U.S. dollar. He's going to bring it over to the BRICS nations, the alternative alliance to the G20. And so the petrodollar is going to be the BRICS buck. And it's not going to be a U.S. buck. And I've always said...
And that's actually happening now, isn't it?
It's happening now, and it's happening very fast. And it's going to happen. I know even some of my better sources, they think it's going to take 5-10 years for the U.S. dollar to become a secondary, tertiary world reserve currency. I've always said it'll be less than 24 months.
That's fast.
It's going to come fast. Sorry, folks, the Titanic is not going to be floating as long as you want. So it's time to kind of adapt to the situation.
Let's begin with some calls, and we'll take calls in the last half, too. West of the Rockies, Tom in Riverside, California. Hey, Tom.
Hey, George.
Good to have you.
Hi, John.
Hi, Tom.
I wanted to throw something out there. I think the biggest problem with the U.S. is we've lost our leadership.
Yes.
I think from my point of view, we needed Donald Trump in there to begin with. We need him now again, and I think he works well with Putin. And I think Putin is a pretty level-headed guy if you treat him right.
Yeah,
it's other problem.
Yeah, it's something I've written about. That his children are half Slavic. Trump. His first wife is Czech, a Slav, and so he gets Slavs. He gets Russia. It's in his chart. If Trump were still president, we would not be having this approach to World War III over Ukraine. I mean, the man makes a lot of faults. He's a wide open channel.
Yeah.
And if there's dark people around him who see that he is a wide open channel, like Bolton and other people, he'll channel a beautiful person and be beautiful, but if he's got dark, deep state people around him, he channels them.
He channels them.
Almost dragged us into war 3 times with Iran, which could have been the other doorway to World War III. But his innocent child inside of him, that 8-year-old he says he's always been and never changed, when that child is there, the same one that blurts out, "You're fake news," or something, it's got so much innocent truth in it, that was engaged at the last moment. So he's got that. Our current president doesn't even have a mind.
I thought you liked him, John.
I don't dislike him or like him, but, haven't I been on your show for
many times,
the election saying, are you really going to elect a man with dementia? I've said that on your show many times. I started saying it in 2018, 2019. Do people listen to me?
They do not. John, we're going to take a quick break and come back and take final calls with you. John's website, HogueProphecy.com, linked up at coasttocoastam.com, and that's where you can get information on his e-magazine, John Hogue's Prophecy e-magazine. He's got some books out there, too, that you can find on his website. And when we come back in a moment, we'll take final calls. So those of you on hold, just hang where you are. We will do our best to get to all of you. This last half hour will go by very fast here. And John has been doing this with us for, he's been on with Art, and he's been on with me. And, John, we just did our 20th year. We're heading for 21. But we'll be back with final calls next. Next hour, we go live to the United Kingdom with Sarah Janes to talk about the mystery of dreams, so make sure you're part of the program. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie back with our final segment with John Hogue as we talk about prophecy. Let's go east of the Rockies. Kathleen is with us in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Hello, Kathleen.
Hi, George. Hi, Mr. Hogue. What would happen if there's not a U.S.-backed currency for the oil? Wouldn't that interrupt OPEC? And how would we have to start drilling again in order to get our groceries and our oil?
What would happen if they dumped the dollar for oil, John?
Well, actually, the OPEC would also go with the BRICS. I mean, that's also what's happening. So basically, the United States would be just holding its empty dollar. And we'd also have to start learning how to spend in our means. You know, when we can make our own money, having the petrodollar allowed us to overspend and do a lot of things that were not the frugal American way of doing things for this century. So we'll have to adapt. This is a moment to alchemically change. We can go, oh, I don't want to change. Oh, I wish it was the same way. Well, it's not going to be. This is one of those times where we're in revolutionary times. Everything is going to change. So find that which is constant in you that cannot change, needs not to change, that witnesses all this change, and then you'll do the best that's possible.
John, what's in the stars for cryptocurrency, which I've never been a fan of?
Well, the problem with cryptocurrency is that it still relies on, at some point, being used as you can get money that is not crypto from it. You know, if the currency that's fiat is crashing, then people cannot afford to buy crypto coins. You know, so
right.
So this is the thing that this is one of the flaws in it. However, the odd thing is down there in El Salvador, everybody's laughing at it if they even know about it. There's a very interesting experiment going on that one of my sources, Stacy Hebert and Max Kaiser, have been. But if you really want to know the cutting edge thinking about Bitcoin, he's the guy usually in his shows until he was unplugged by this war because he was on RT. But there's very interesting things going on in El Salvador where they might be finding a way to generate Bitcoin through geothermal power and kind of create a separate society of trade with Bitcoins and all. But outside, I could say this, if it's not Bitcoin, if it's any of the other coins, it's just a glorified fiat economy.
Let's go to Todd in Bellevue, Washington. Take it away, Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Norrie. Now, Mr. Christogamo wrote a couple of songs called The Prophecy and also The Warning, which is the title track from Queensryche's second album. And they recorded an album up in your island community in 1993. I was wondering if you were around at that time. But
no,
also, I
wasn't. I was in Seattle.
If you believe that Grigory, what was the guy's name? Rasputin, the Russian prophet. Do you think it's possible to be a good prophet and a womanizer at the same time? And do you think he could have prevented World War I if he was consulting Nicholas II at the time he went?
Well, he's a very, very misunderstood mystic. He, in the mystic circles that I deal with, he was actually a man who was had great city powers, healing powers. He got lost, though, in the world of power, political power. And really, as a mystic, he was one step from becoming a liberated person, but he fell all the way down because in the last step he got identified with the political power and the sexuality and all of that. But I could go for 2 hours on a story about cleaning up this whole myth about Rasputin and showing that there was also a lot of good in him, but he did fall. The fall of the magician.
Yeah, absolutely. It's incredible how many times prophecy has come true. John, it's amazing, isn't it?
It is. It always surprises me. It always. I'm updating. I have this huge Nostradamus project where I'm creating 3 volumes to really do a true, complete examination of Nostradamus. It's going to take years to finish, and I'm going over a lot of the things that I wrote back in the mid '90s, and it's been an interesting study to see what was right, what was wrong, even in my own things, because I usually, when I make a prediction, I just forget about it and move on to the next moment, and I have to kind of look back to see what I said or have people write, hey, don't you remember you said something about that? Oh, no, I didn't remember. So,
how many quatrains did he write?
Well, he probably wrote 1,000, but only 942 survived.
He put them in a book called The Prophecies?
Yeah, The Prophecies of Michel de Notre Dame. Yeah, that's a pretty generic name, just Les Prophéties. And so in this thing I'm doing 3 volumes because he released his entire works into serialization over the 1550s, mid-1550s, into the early 1560s. And so I figured, okay, I will do the same. I will translate and interpret all of his prose prophecies, which outnumber his verses, which usually most people don't see. And it's interesting because even though they're mostly about the times between 1550 and 1567, local history, every once in a while he jumps out, and some of his best prophecies come. So I'm going to be looking for those golden nuggets when I do this vast project and get it done. The first serialization should be scheduled out in 2025, followed in 2026 and 2027.
Let's go to Will in New York. Hi, Will. Go ahead, sir.
Hello. Interesting conversation tonight. I wanted to ask Mr. Hogue if you have a thought. Well, both the NATO expansion by Sweden and Finland. I'm curious what your explanation is for their, joining or wanting to join on their own.
I'll answer that. Sorry to cut you off. I just want to make sure we get as many people in as possible. So in that situation, it's a remarkably stupid move. The Finns had a great relationship in their neutrality that was supposed in writing to be in perpetuity. So they break that contract. And so now, where they had a peaceful border with the Russians are now going to expand the Russian army by another 500,000 men in the next year or two. And now they're going to have Russians on the border. They didn't have any of that for 50, 60, 70 years. And so, just so they could be part of the stupid club in Brussels, this president of Finland who likes to do dirty dancing and have herself filmed doing dirty dancing. It's really quite something to watch. I mean,
no thanks.
Well, I mean, in watching that, you kind of go, my God, is this the level of intelligence of leaders these days in the new generations? Are they that socially illiterate, politically illiterate, that they just really could? And they didn't even ask the Finnish people if they wanted to be part of NATO. They just decided, well, we'll just do it. This is the world we're living in right now.
We've got Nettie west of the Rockies in San Luis Obispo in California. And hello, Nettie.
Oh, hi. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure, you're welcome.
Maybe Mr. Hogue, I should say, Господин Hogue. I'm just thinking that there's a piece of the puzzle that many people aren't aware of. Perhaps I'm sure you both are, but I wanted to make a comment about that.
What's the puzzle, Nettie?
It's the fact that after World War II, the U.S. Congress passed a law called the Smith-Mundt Act, which prevented Congress and the U.S. government from propagandizing and lying to the American people. I'm thinking it was perhaps precipitated because of all the shenanigans going on with Alan Dulles at the time and his cohorts. Yeah. But in 2012, Obama signed the revision of that act. It was called the Smith-Mundt Improvement Act. And of course, the improvement was that now they can lie. It's no longer illegal to lie to the American people.
Go ahead, John.
And this is the thing, folks.
This is real, isn't it?
Your civics classes for 2-3 generations have been systematically dropped from the curriculum of getting your high school diploma. And that is one of the things that's made over a few generations the United States lose their literacy about your responsibility. Each one of you listening to me, you have a responsibility as equal to the government to watch the government, to be aware of your rights, to know what your constitutional rights are, and to always be watching the people you vote into power. Because if you just kind of blissfully go off in your little fuzzy worlds and leave these people to their own devices, you've got this happening. So you are responsible. As it's not those idiots that you voted for. You are responsible for what is happening, and therefore you can respond if you take up that responsibility. If you stop blaming it on other people, your leaders are symptomatic of you. So stop being stupid. Learn your Constitution. Learn your rights. Learn how your government works. It's very easy to find on the internet. You don't need civic class, but until you Americans do that, you deserve exactly what you're getting. You're making it happen. If you can face yourself, you can change it. But if you pretend it's somebody else doing it, it'll get worse.
John, did Nostradamus die peacefully or not?
Well, he died peacefully enough to watch the terrible pain he was in from pulmonary edema and dropsy, and his legs were swelling. And I don't think he slept for the last 3 months of his life, and had to be propped up. But his secretary Chauvigny, who counted his last days, said that he was very serene in his pain. He accepted it. He lived his life. He died his life.
In the minute we have left, tell people about your e-magazine again and how they can get it.
Yes, you just go to HogueProphecy.com, look for the green eye icon that's right at the top of the beginning of the text. There's a little blurb on how you can click there, what you'll be getting, how you'll be getting it. And it's lots of rich stuff. Just look at the rest of the articles that are there. Those are free samples of just the tip of the iceberg of what you're getting there. And also at the top of my website is an email where if you want a Hogue reading, you just click on that link to me, and then I'll get back to you and give you times, available times, and what the reading entails and how it's paid for.
John's done some great readings for us at some of our live stage shows around the country, and we bring up people from the audience, and he does his thing, and they've had a great time doing that, John.
Yes, it's been a lot of fun. Love those shows.
All right, my friend. Stay well and stay healthy, okay?
You too, George.
John Hogue, his website, hogueprophecy.com. Up next, we're going live to the United Kingdom to talk about the mysteries of dreams with Sarah Janes. Looking forward to that. This is going to be a first-time guest, so let's see what we do when we come back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM with Sarah Janes in the United Kingdom. Up next on Coast to Coast, Sarah Janes joins us as we talk about initiation into dream mysteries. Get ready for that on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Sarah Janes with us has been an enthusiastic lucid dreamer since childhood. She is a writer, public speaker, sleep hypnosis workshop facilitator. She runs the Explorers Egyptology, an online lecture series, and that she does that with Carl Hayden Smith, operating the Seventh Ray, a virtual reality mystery school. She's the producer and co-host of the Anthony Peake Consciousness Hour podcast, and Sarah is currently working with Rupert Sheldrake and the British Pilgrimage Trust to reinvigorate the practice of dream incubation at sacred sites. Sarah, welcome to the program. Looking forward to this.
Thank you so much for having me, George.
And how are things in the United Kingdom?
Well, it is about 8:30 here this morning, and my daughter's getting ready for school, and the bin men are outside collecting the bins, and it's a bit cold. I live on the seaside in Hastings, so you might be able to hear some seagulls in the background.
Well, that'll be great. How'd you get interested in dreams? How did these all start for you?
I've always been into dreams, and I can remember dreams from being a really small child. I always just used dreaming as a form of escapism, I think. I grew up in a really kind of boring town in South London and lived on a main road next to a sewage farm and an industrial estate and a landfill. So I used dreaming as an opportunity to explore my imagination, to explore worlds that I had read about in books. I was really into the adventures of Alice in Wonderland and things like that. So it was always just a sort of natural thing for me.
When you started lucid dreaming, which is a dream, you know you're in a dream, did it surprise you?
I think I always had them from being quite young. I remember distinctly a dream from primary school where I had this sort of sense of ecstasy and bliss in the dream, which is something that I still associate with lucidity now, and that you don't generally hear that much about. But the defining feature for me of lucidity is this bodily feeling of ecstasy and bliss.
It is fascinating. The dream state is very powerful too. You could, if you can command it, you can do all kinds of things with it, can't you?
I think that was my main reason for being so fascinated by dreaming as a child. I remember my two kind of main interests in dreaming, even from a very young age, was I've always wanted to be a film director, and I dream a lot of films, and my film aesthetic is very much dictated to by dream imagery and motifs and the feeling I have in dreams. So I wanted to be a film dream director, and I wanted to invent a machine that could record my dreams so I could, really easily make a film that other people could watch. And then the other thing was I had this idea that lucid dreaming, the mastery of lucid dreaming, could enable me to transcend death somehow and hold on to my consciousness as I died. So I was always really interested in it for those two reasons, and I think they've kind of continued to be really big interests for me as well.
You evoke in your book the name of a Greek goddess who I'll let you pronounce more than I will. How do you pronounce her name?
Mnemosyne. So she's a personification of memory, remembrance, eloquence, eruditeness. She's the mother of all of the muses, so she's the source of all inspiration, and she's the daughter of heaven, Uranos, and earth, Gaia.
Do you tap into this goddess for anything?
Well, I think she's a fascinating goddess because in the Greek pantheon of gods, she's one of the earliest gods. She's a titaness, and I find it really interesting that as the goddess of remembrance, she's also the mother of all of the muses, so the source of all inspiration in the world, all divine inspiration in the world. And I think that she was a goddess that was often in the Greek sleep temple tradition, at least, which was sleep sanctuaries dedicated to the dream healer god Asclepius. In the final ritual where you'd go to incubate your divine dream that would heal you, could actually actively heal you in the dream state, or provide the therapeutae of the temples with clues as to your treatment or medicine, you would invoke the goddess Mnemosyne using a fumigation of frankincense. And I find it really interesting that this goddess of remembrance was so important. I think it indicates that the ancient Greek philosophy of memory and appreciation for the art of memory was really significant. And I think that dreams, and especially lucid dreams, offer an opportunity to explore the real function and nature of memory in a way that ordinary waking consciousness doesn't. So Mnemosyne would have been invoked for this final stage of the dream healing process. And I think that's because not only do you need to remember your dream to extract important information about a cure from it, but you also need to remember yourself within the dream. And in that instance, you would say that that's a lucid dream then, if you're remembering the fact that you're dreaming. And I think one of my tips for people when they come to my workshops about how to activate more episodes of lucid dreaming, I always say that if you have a crush on someone or a romantic attraction towards someone, when you dream about them, you quite often become lucid because you get excited when you see them. And I think for ancient people who had this culture of dreaming and believing that the dream space was a place where you could meet divine entities, that they would have become ecstatic or inspired to see this divine entity. And there's lots of descriptions of ancient dreams in ancient Greek and ancient Egyptian texts in particular that describe being flowing with love and joy and ecstasy at seeing a divine being. So I think that to me also suggests that they were experiencing these lucid, ecstatic, blissful moments. And in the kind of terminology of ancient dreaming, and these healing dreams, they talk often about these dreams being divine, and that's kind of how I like to think of lucid dreaming, especially when it has that ecstatic and blissful component, is that it's a divine dream. It's kind of sent by the gods.
Would you rather have a precognitive dream or a lucid dream if you had that choice?
I've always been a bit nervous of fortune telling because I know how suggestive I am, and if I have some vision of the future, then I tend to think it's going to come true, and I might not necessarily want it to come true. I think dreaming is a really good place to manifest your desires. If you kind of perfect your life in the dream realm, it's easy then for that to filter into your real life. So if you can dream it, this kind of idea, if you can dream it, you can be it. I think it's very true, and I think that part of the dreaming process is to perfect yourself in the dream state and to hope that your dreaming, the dream version of yourself is equal to the real life waking version of yourself. So precognitive dreams, I mean, that's an interesting question because I'm interested in the idea in the ancient world that dreams were all about predicting the future. So we have this culture around dream analysis these days, which is all to do with the psychology of the dreamer, the experiences of the dreamer, the process of trauma for the dreamer, the psychology of the dreamer. But in the ancient world, dream interpretation is really all about predicting the future, and not necessarily through direct precognitive dreams where we have a vision of the future, but through wordplay, puns, and homophones that act as clues to be unraveled, like oracles that can be decoded and give people hints about future events, which I think is fascinating because if you think that the primary objective of working out what a dream means is about predicting the future, it reveals a lot about the consciousness of the time.
A lot of people, Sarah, will have these precognitive dreams, but they don't realize what it is until the real event happens, and they go, oh, my God, I had that dream.
Yeah. I think that with dreaming in particular, and in the case of all kinds of divination and oracular arts as well, actually, there's this idea that everything is within everything. So I've had dreams in the past where, because they are visual imagery, they're symbolic, they can kind of be used to then explain later events just by the nature of reality, that nature and the world is made up of images, symbols, and motifs. So I had a dream a while ago about two eagles flying in the sky and them dropping a chick, and this chick drowning in a river underneath them. And I remember sitting on this plane thinking that could mean that I'm going to crash into another plane and then we're going to fall into this river. And then because it's all symbolic, it could also be interpreted to mean kind of anything. And later on, I saw images just on social media of like a baby chick with its claws coming out of some water, and I thought it could also mean that. So I think that in the case of oracles and divination, from the most ancient of times, so you look at someone like King Shulgi of the ancient Near East, in that era, they were very keen on haru spicy or extra spicy, which is reading the future in a lamb's liver. And there's this idea that King Shulgi expresses that in the insides of a single sheep, I can see the secrets of the entire universe. So there's this idea of this sort of pattern or matrix of nature that reveals itself through its machinations in almost anything. And if you are sensitive and intuitive, then I actually think predicting the future is quite easy and natural, because you're always picking up and noticing signs and evidence of the future in every passing moment.
Well, with Sarah Janes, her websites are linked up at coasttocoastam.com. We're talking about her book, Initiation into Dream Mysteries. With the power of dreams, you believe we can influence our own dreams. How do we do that?
Well, this was the main focus of the ancient sleep temples and sanctuaries and rituals around dreaming in the ancient world, is the practice of dream incubation. So this is setting an intention for a dream and quite often desiring an outcome and desiring to have an encounter with some sort of divine entity. And for most cultures in the ancient world, especially Mesopotamia, ancient Greece, ancient Egypt, there's this idea that where dreams occur, it's the same realm as where gods, goddesses, and the dead dwell as well. So there's this definite sense of there being an other world or an afterlife, which you kind of access during the dream state.
Sarah, you mentioned earlier that dreams could be used for healing. Does the dream heal or just give you the information on how to heal?
I think it can do both, and this is an element I'm super interested in and looking to do more study into. I'm working with more scientists these days to try to test this hypothesis, which is that especially during episodes of lucidity, which, as your listeners probably know, a lucid dream is a dream in which you don't necessarily control what's happening, but you know you're in a dream and you have full self-awareness. Your frontal cortex is activated, and you're able to apply critical thinking, self-reflection, things like this, which you can't usually ever do in a dream.
I mean, in lucid dream, you say things like, if I fall off a building, I'm not going to die. It's only a dream.
Yeah,
and you know that.
Yeah, you have this awareness. So I think if you look at dream healing in particular in ancient Greece, which is an easy one because there's so much evidence and so many inscriptions at the sleep temples. There are about 400 temples around the ancient Hellenic world that were dedicated to this dream healer god Asclepius, who was kind of a precursor to Jesus. He was essentially a miracle worker and could heal people and was this very sort of like loving, humble God. And he was the son of the god Apollo, and Apollo was the god of music and healing as well, and later associated with the sun. And so my thinking about the potential for healing in the lucid dream state is that you've got this extraordinary state of entanglement between mind and body during lucid episodes. And if dream events are occurring that are provoking healing responses, and in particular these feelings of ecstasy and bliss, during sleep you have certain genes that are switched on and not switched on during wakefulness, which are associated with the process of homeostasis. So this is the natural process of rebalancing, of detoxification, cell regeneration, and things like this, which occur during deep sleep, which are basically the things that help our body heal and recalibrate every night. So if you think that during episodes of lucidity you have this consciousness of the dream state. If dream events are happening, so for example, in the Asclepia, you might have Asclepius performing some sort of physically impossible operation on you. Like if you're suffering from headaches, he might cut your head off, tip a load of bees out, then sew it back on. And if you think that these dream events, you're experiencing them as if they're really real, your body may respond to a greater or lesser degree to kind of match that healing response. So we know that placebo effect works. We know that a faith healing response can occur. So I think something like that can occur in the dream state. And during episodes of lucidity, that can be especially powerful and deep. I mean, if you think, I always compare it to when people have orgasms or wet dreams, because their bodies are responding to dream stimuli. And so I think something similar might be happening when people are able to heal themselves in dreams. And obviously there can be very sort of well-established conditions where it might take longer for those effects to take place. But I think in the sleep temples of ancient Greece, there was very much this idea that you didn't go into the inner sanctum if you were at death's door or about to give birth. There was this idea of an impurity around death, that you could be polluted by being too close to death. So a lot of the illnesses that were tackled in those sleep temples had a psychosomatic component. And also, if you think about it, I mean, these sleep sanctuaries were like beautiful spas. You know, I often describe Asclepius as being a kind of precursor to Wim Hof. He was really into cold water bathing,
right.
boosting the immune system. So you would do processes of fasting, purification, purging and catharsis through art and expression. And a lot of conditions or ailments will right themselves given the right circumstances and enough time. So for most human bodies are always trying to get back to wellness and harmony. So given the right conditions, most things can be healed themselves. So I think that the sleep sanctuary gave you that perfect place, that perfect opportunity, this sort of feng shui sanctuary of healing and harmony that would have helped everyone to kind of get back to their ideal state.
Sarah, when we have recurring dreams, the same dream over and over again, what does that mean?
Usually this is because we have some kind of issue that we haven't resolved. And one of the best ways of dealing with this would be to write down the result that you want out of this dream and to really explore every element of this dream. I often say, like, writing a dream down can help you see aspects of dreams that you might not necessarily consider. There's definitely something magical in the process of writing. It is the process of remembering a dream. And as in the ancient dream interpretation, you see so much of a dream is interpreted based upon homophones, so words that sound the same, and wordplay and punning. So sometimes when you see a word written down, you see these other layers of meaning that you might miss otherwise.
It's fascinating, the dream state. And are most dreams originating from the brain, or is there something outside of the brain?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I think of the human organism as being an integrated system and connected to the rest of the cosmos to more, to greater or lesser extent. I have a kind of theory about when we go through periods of REM and then we sink into the deepest possible sleep, that we're returning to a kind of primordial consciousness, and maybe a consciousness of the world or consciousness of the cosmos. I think that this is a mystery that will probably remain for a bit longer. Yeah.
All right, Sarah, we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back and chat more with you on Coast to Coast AM. We're going to take calls with Sarah Jane's next hour as we talk about dreams. So share your dream stories or your questions when we'll get to that next hour on Coast to Coast. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Sarah Jane's with us. We're talking about her latest work called Initiation into Dream Mysteries. Where do nightmares fit into this, Sarah?
I think nightmares are often opportunities to integrate challenging experiences, trauma, all sorts of challenges and anxieties. A lot of people that I speak to these days, their nightmares more take the form of anxiety dreams. But it's very interesting how nightmares developed and the sort of cultural perspective on them. In the ancient world, there's a lot of emphasis on nightmares because there was this idea that the dream itself was a kind of personified spirit. So there's a lot of talk in ancient dream texts about occurrences that sound a lot like sleep paralysis, night terrors, and things like that. And that's interesting because belief kind of informs your dream experiences, and dreams are quite culturally specific as well. And so if you believe you're going to have nightmares, if you worry about having nightmares, then they're more likely to recur. The thing that I would suggest for people that have nightmares is, A, don't watch horror films, because a surprising amount of people have, and complain about being plagued by nightmares and watch a lot of horror films. And try to fall asleep in a sort of restful, pleasant, happy way. And certain herbs can be really good for this. There's a number of really nice anti-anxiety herbs like lemon balm, lavender, chamomile that can improve your sort of sense of peace and calm as you're falling asleep.
I had heard, too, if you put the herb mugwort in your pillowcase, you'd have pleasant dreams. What do you think of that?
Yeah, the mugwort can be used as a tea. It can be smoked. You can also just have it in your pillows. That's a tradition from, certainly in ancient England. Mugwort was also brewed into beer and things like this as well. Mugwort is supposed to give you more sort of vivid and lucid dreams. I personally don't. I think everyone has a different kind of chemistry and makeup, and I personally don't have many of those kinds of experiences with mugwort. I don't find that mugwort works that well for me. But then also, when I gather my own mugwort, I do notice quite a big difference. So I think it might have something to do with the sort of freshness of the herb. But mugwort does have a really nice smell. It's a really sort of fragrant, good herb to use. And a lot of people report that it gives them more lucid or vivid, colourful dreams.
Sarah, what about shared dreams? How do they occur?
I think for me, it's hard to explain the mechanisms behind shared dreams, but there certainly is a lot of evidence and personal accounts and experiences. And myself, I have had shared dreams quite often when you're sleeping with a partner and you're sharing that space. I think that often your kind of dream landscapes overlap, and quite often you can have dreams when you're with a partner where you're both in the dream together. And I think, when you're sleeping, you are always picking up information from the outside world or from your sleeping environment. And I think that this gets forgotten about quite often because people have this idea that you're in this completely cut off imaginal realm, but actually you're constantly picking up sensory impressions from your environment. And if you are sleeping next to someone, then you're always sensitive to the fact that that person is next to you. And I think that the very sort of subtle sensory impressions that come in can be manifested into quite dramatic visual content.
Sarah, why do you think dreams are so important to us?
Well, they clearly have an impact on our health, well-being, psychology, wellness. A lot of people find themselves stuck in a rut if they don't have a happy dream life. And things like antidepressants, cannabis use can suppress REM sleep. And I think that this is how we can often end up stuck in a rut, because especially with something like antidepressants, a lot of people experiencing anxiety and depression either sleep too much or don't sleep enough or don't have satisfying sleep. And it can be really useful to help someone who's suffering from anxiety in particular to give them that opportunity to have deep, satisfying sleep. But short-term use is very different to long-term use, where over a long period of time you're suppressing someone's REM sleep, because that dream sleep really helps us process, integrate, evolve, and develop personally. And I think that that's incredibly important in terms of life enrichment and satisfaction and contentment in life. So one of the reasons why I really got into this as a job and studying it and pursued it as a career is because I've always had amazing dreams and a really satisfying dream life and really excellent sleep hygiene. I've never experienced insomnia until I had my daughter when I was 30. And then I had pretty much 2 years of insomnia, broken sleep, and it nearly killed me.
Jeez, yeah, that's rough.
Not just the sleep deprivation aspect itself, the sort of physical weariness of not getting satisfying sleep, but also I've always used dreams as this like creative, expressive, joyful realm, and to be cut off of that, access to that was just horrendous for me. And I'd always taken it for granted. So when I got that back and I was able to have lucid dreams again and able to dream again, I was so full of appreciation that I realized that this is something that could deeply enrich everybody's life if they spent more time and they gave more attention and more time to their dream life.
Sarah, do you think babies dream?
Oh, yeah, babies dream more than anyone. Babies spend most of their dreaming, sleeping phases in REM sleep. So their REM takes up about half of their entire sleeping, which is massive because for adults, it's about 20% of our time asleep is spent in REM sleep. And I think this is because babies are literally working out who and where they are and why they're there. And you are kind of creating this psychic architecture in the dream realm. You're constructing this subconscious memory palace, like a realm where you're constructing your personality. So I think dreams are actually formalizing your personality, and the dream itself is encoding the psyche. So when you do dream, I think it's important and worth remembering that you're not just an avatar in a dream. You're not in this virtual reality world that someone else has created. You are the dream. You are every single aspect of the dream. The dream is your personality, soul, psyche encoded into an entire universe.
It is amazing the way a dream works. And how do you train people to remember your dreams?
Well, this is an interesting aspect of dreaming that I'm most interested in is memory and remembering. And this is why I'm so fascinated by the goddess Mnemosyne, because I think she really is the personification of memory, consciousness, remembrance. And interestingly, when, you know, how the Romans kind of readopted the Greek pantheon of gods and goddesses, when they took on Mnemosyne, she became the goddess Moneta, the goddess of debt and money. So it's interesting how we lost the goddess, we forgot the goddess of memory, and we had this new goddess of debt and money. So I train people up to remember their dreams by cultivating good memory faculties, and cultivating good memory faculties is the key to lucid dreaming, I think. So journaling, writing dreams down, things like nootropic supplements that increase your cognitive abilities and enhance your memory function, all of these things will contribute to good lucid dream or lucid dreams. You don't need to recall lucid dreams in the same way because your brain kind of map looks different, activity looks different in lucid dreaming. You actually remember lucid dreams just the same as you do waking reality. They kind of are more vivid because more of your memory functions are active. So anything that can increase your memory, like game playing, actual memory games, reading, writing, all these kinds of things that work towards improving your memory will help with lucid dream recall. And the more you do write your dreams down, the more you create this feedback system between your waking and dreaming self, the stronger these neural pathways become, and the more you can generate dream content that's easy to remember.
Fascinating. It truly is. Do you think technology will ever get to the point where they can hook up electrodes to your head, and then when you dream, you'd literally see a video of that dream on a screen?
Well, there are certain experiments that have taken place that have attempted to do some sort of facsimile of that. So there was a study in Japan where they were showing, like with participants hooked up to like a neural net, like a really sort of complex EEG electrodes. They were showing these participants hours and hours of YouTube footage that showed various different kinds of visual iconography, and then they were recording the activity in the brain and kind of mapping out what areas of the brain were responding to what kinds of visual input and imagery. So then when those same participants were dreaming later on, they're hooked up to that neural net again, and the idea is that you can sort of refigure everything that they're dreaming about by using the kind of map that you've created by recording them, watching hours and hours of footage. And it's fascinating because it's very sort of blurry and lumpy and not very sort of high definition, but you do get this sense of the sort of the way that dreams morph and the timing of dreams. So it is fascinating to watch. So, for example, you can see a participant dreaming that they're looking at a speaking head and then a sort of landscape view, and then things might change or dissolve or become mosaic-y. Like, you do get some sense of the kind of dream flow and sort of visual fields and iconography. And then a friend of mine, Daniel Oldis, who's a dream researcher working, I think he's in California now, he's working with decoding dream speech. So this was one of the areas of research that I find absolutely fascinating. So basically, when you're speaking in a dream, so if you're having a conversation with someone in a dream, your voice box is actually making the micro movements that are associated with speech. So Daniel's been doing this study where he's using electromyography, so very sensitive movement detecting device which can measure movements in the face and in the throat to try to analyze what these micro movements are doing and to convert them into actual speech, which I find amazing. So when he told me about this for the first time, I was like, wow, that's so weird, because actually it's a technology that I think the military were working on initially to use subvocalization to communicate between people when obviously sound is going to be an issue and mean that people can be detected. So they're using subvocal movements to communicate with one another. So this is the same technology.
Does every dream have meaning? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that to sort of lesser or greater degree, there's this idea in the ancient world, there's definitely sort of a categorization of dreams. So some dreams are absolutely divine, they need no interpretation. You've had a divine encounter in the dream realm. Other dreams where you're given clues, hints, riddles that could be interpreted by a dream interpreter. And then there are other dreams where I think it's sort of generally accepted it's just a kind of rehashing of your day so far, or nothing very spectacular happens. It's a sort of mundane dream. So yeah, there's definitely grades of dreams.
Of all the dreams that people have had, what would you say would be the most advantageous to themselves of these various types we've talked about?
I would say healing dreams. Like I can imagine that to have that sort of spontaneous healing experience, often I have these feelings, these sort of dream epiphanies where I have this revelation in the dream state, which feels really moving and amazing. So I think for me, it's healing dreams and divine dreams.
And when people have these kinds of dreams, how should they react to them? If you dream, for example, that you're sick, should you go to the doctor?
Well, quite often, as I was saying, because you're picking up on this sort of really subtle sensory information while you're asleep, really sort of subtle physical things can manifest as more dramatic visual content in the dream. So, for example, there's the old idea that you don't eat cheese before you go to bed because it gives you nightmares. And I think this is because if you try to digest a lot of food before you sleep, your digestive system can be working overtime while you should be resting and relaxing. So this often manifests for people as being in like battles or wars or fighting because your digestive system is like struggling to digest this food when it should be resting. So Yeah, I think if you have dreams where there's something wrong with you and you can't interpret it any other way, why not go to the doctors and check? Because you are perhaps picking up on very subtle sensory information, but also there could be more symbolic reference to these kinds of things as well.
What about people who have mass dreams of events, not necessarily precognitive, but a lot of people dreaming the same thing?
Yeah, as I was saying, there's a lot of sort of cultural specificity to dreams, and I think there was a recent article published about what main dream themes and motifs are for different people in different countries. So I think that there's definitely some sense of there being a collective soul and cultures and nations. And, you know, if you look at something like COVID, I got phone calls from radio stations non-stop during COVID because people were having crazy dreams and they weren't used to having as vivid dreams because there was this collective anxiety, fear, an unknown threat. So people were processing this a lot in the dream state. And because with COVID, there was this sort of invisible threat, this viral threat that you couldn't see that was an unknown quantity. It was quite interesting. I don't know about in the UK, but in England, everyone was watching Tiger King when COVID first broke. And many people were visualizing the COVID threat as being tigers or big cats or lions because the dream seeks to make manifest thoughts and feelings. So a lot of the first COVID dreams were things like people swarming with insects because they had to somehow visualize the worry and the fear and the threat that they were thinking about.
We're going to take a quick break, Sarah, then we're going to come back and take phone calls with you next on Coast to Coast. Let's talk about your dreams. Sarah Jane's with us, her book, Initiation into Dream Mysteries, and we'll take your calls with her when we come back on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie along with Sarah Jane. Sarah, where do people get your book, Initiation into Dream Mysteries?
I think they can get it from pretty much anywhere. It's on Amazon. It should be in bookshops. It came out in the US on the 27th of December, and in the UK it's coming out on the 2nd of February.
And does your website have all the events that you're at?
It does, yes. themysteries.org.
You've got a lot of events coming up, don't you?
Yeah, I'm doing a online dream course at the beginning of February. I'm really looking forward to doing a conference in Tuscany. It's a really small conference, and I think tickets include accommodation and food and drink in a really beautiful restaurant in this little medieval village in Tuscany. That's the first week of June. And then in October, I'm planning a week-long symposium in Athens, which explores every aspect of sleeping and dreaming in the home of sleep temples.
Let's take some calls for you. They're lining up. Let's go to Butch, first-time caller, truck driving in North Carolina. Welcome to the show. Hey, Butch, go ahead.
Hello, George. Congratulations on the 20 years.
Oh, thank you, Butch.
Thank you so much for keeping us entertained out here that drive through the night listening to you. I really enjoy your show.
Thank you.
Fascinating guest. I have a couple of quick questions. One is, what percentage of people dream in color, and what percentage of people dream in black and white? I've never had a dream in black and white. All of mine are always in vivid color. And I believe I have precognitive and both lucid dreams. Is that something that's normal?
Wow, it sounds like you have an excellent dream life. I think that's an interesting question. It would probably be impossible to know truly how many people dream in black and white and how many people dream in color. The sort of visual spectrum and the color spectrum is fascinating in dreams because I think a lot of people experience colors in dreaming that they don't necessarily experience in wakefulness. It can often be quite vivid. Pinks and blues dominate in the visual field in dreams. I wonder with the black and white thing whether, because a lot of what we dream comes from things that we've seen on TV or film, I wonder whether our perception of colour and dreaming changed when we went from watching black and white TV sets and black and white films to colour films and colour TV. And I think perhaps probably things like colour blindness may affect the colour content of dreams as well.
Why would somebody dream in black and white in the first place, Sarah?
I don't know of many people that do dream in black and white, but I think that, you know, people have all kinds of different dreams, and I always think of dreams as being like an individual's oeuvre, as if they're a film director, and their motifs and their themes continue in their dream life throughout their experience of the world. So I think it might just be a sort of stylistic or aesthetic trend. I think everyone has a dream aesthetic, but I think most people do dream in colour. Most people that experience colour and wakefulness will have colourful dreams as well.
And he said he has precognitive dreams, lucid dreaming. How much is too much?
I don't know if there's any such thing as too much. I mean, some people sometimes talk about the dangers of lucid dreaming or the risks of lucid dreaming. I remember as a kid, I think it was influenced by Freddy Krueger films. There was this idea that if you died in a dream, you were going to die in real life. And I remember the first time I decided, well, I'll just go for it and see what happens. And I didn't die in real life, and I've lived to tell the tale on many occasions. And actually, going through that death process in a dream can be really healing and transformative, because it's like an alchemical process that happens. So precognitive dreams, I guess, it depends how they're manifesting. If they're traumatic or anxious, then that could obviously be troubling. Often dreams don't necessarily present kind of exact replicas of the future about to unfold. They can drop hints and clues. So it depends whether you're seeing the future and it's troubling you, it isn't troubling you, and you feel happy with your dream life. I would say that that's all good.
It sure should be, absolutely. And let's hope that in the dream state we can continue to do powerful things, Sarah. I mean,
yeah, I think that the dream space is a place of magic, and you can manifest your greatest desires and wishes and dreams in that state.
Sarah, we're losing you a little bit on the phone. Can you get into a certain position or something?
Yeah, maybe I will move closer towards my window.
Okay, that'll be better. Well, let's go to Robert in North Dakota. Take it away. Hey, Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, George, I want to thank you for 20 years of a wonderful trip we've been on together.
Thank you, Robert.
Many hours you and I have spent together. And what's interesting is I've always been scared to talk to you on the radio, but after all these years of listening to you, I feel like I know you.
We're friends.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I want to ask a question, and then I want to tell you about a dream I had. And my question is for you is it strange to have a narrator in your dreams? Like, I'll be sitting here looking at this beach or the sunset, and it goes, wow, what a beautiful sunset. I think that in my head as I'm watching this wonderful dream. Is that something you've run into before?
Does that come up, Sarah?
Well, that's interesting, because some people don't have the inner voice at all. It's one of these interesting things. You also get people that have aphantasia, where they don't have visual imagery, but similarly you have people that don't have this inner dialogue. So it depends on, I guess, in wakefulness, do you have this inner dialogue often? Because I think people do have this experience of a kind of inner narrator. And, dreams can be anything. They're usually a reflection of your personality and your waking experiences to some extent.
And, Robert, tell us about your dream. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, this dream starts, I'm working in a coal mine, and, of course, all the people get there in the mornings, and we're sitting at a table, and the boss comes in, and he hands out the assignments, and he hands me this card. It's for a PM to work on this loader, and I remember looking at it. It said 928 Laterno, and so the day goes on, and I go down to the place where they do the work on this Laterno, and the Laterno is a huge front-end loader. I mean, it is actually massive, and my dream goes on. I remember taking this plate off the front, and these motors have huge wheel motors inside, and I'm an electrician, so you crawl inside this place where the motors are at, and as I'm sitting in there, I hear the door open, the big bay door. They're huge. And I just pop my head out. There's a little space you can see, and I see them pulling the blasting truck in. Now, this truck is typically completely full of an ammonium nitrate. It's what they blast with at the mine. And as I crawl back in and I'm laying there, and it's kind of comfortable in there. It's cool and nice, and it was kind of a hot summer day, and I'm in there to change these brushes. And anyway, then there was a massive explosion in my dream. And I remember being unconscious, and I wake up and I crawl out of this little hole. You know, this Laterno has like 2 inches of plate steel. But I remember it destroyed the entire building. And all my friends and everybody was dead. It's like Oklahoma City type of a bomb.
Yeah.
Well, but I remember in my dream that I was safe. Well, what made this dream crazy was the next day I get to work and I'm sitting there at the table, and the boss comes in and he hands me that card, and it says 928 Laterno. And I'm going, whoa, deja vu, you know, and I thought, wow, that's really weird. And so I go down, and I've done this PM many times. So I'm not surprised that I dreamed how to do it. I mean, I do the same thing over and over. I take the bolts off, I crawl inside, and as I'm laying there, I'm remembering looking up at this one spot on the ceiling, you know, and I thought, well, the only reason you're looking at that is because that's what you looked at in your dream. You know, it's not reality, you know, it's not happening to you. And then I hear the doors open, and my heart starts beating because, you know, I was in an explosion. And I peek out, and sure enough, this big blasting truck is being backed into the bay. And as I'm sitting there, I remember, you're going to be safe. And I thought, well, you know, I should get out and try to stop this. But I remember in my dreams that I didn't have that much time to get out. But I decided to make the decision to get out, and I walked up to the guy, and he's a welder, and he's doing a PM on the blasting truck. And I tell him, what are you doing? And he says, well, I need to fix this. And I said, that truck is completely full of explosives. He said, oh, it isn't either. It's here to be worked on. And he crawled to the top of that truck and opened the lid, and it was completely full of ammonium nitrate.
Jeez.
The truck that he was supposed to work on was in the wash bay being washed. And this guy had just pulled up in front of the shop to actually go to the warehouse and get a flashlight. And so that was a dream that, I don't know, it just kind of blew me away, and I can remember it like it was yesterday.
What causes something like that, Sarah?
Wow, what an amazing experience.
And detailed.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible. I mean, to me, that just hints at the fact that reality and consciousness are more complex than we can possibly imagine, and that you were able to see the future and save a lot of lives.
What determines the kind of dream that one has? I mean, we have episodes every day. We meet lots of people. We go through lots of things. Why that particular dream when we have it?
I think the process of dreaming is all about remembering ourselves in time and space. So dreams help us to form a sense of self and to cultivate our sense of identity, our personality, and our place in the world. So, you know, an ordinary dream, I mean, you know, the dream that we just talked about is quite an extraordinary experience, but it opens up the possibility to consider there's more to consciousness and the kind of interconnectivity of time and space than we might give credit to. But yeah, ordinarily I think they're about remembering ourselves in time and space and confirming our sense of identity.
East of the Rockies, we've got Michael in Connecticut. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Hey, thank you for having me, George.
Thank you.
What happened to me was I started a dream journal, and I dreamed about 4 or 5 different dreams that came true. You know, I was able to tell the future on them. But this is the dream I really need to talk about, too, which was the most interesting one to me. That night, I said to myself, I want to dream something good about, you know, the old days when things were good. You know, went to sleep, and I dreamed that I was 22 years old again, and I was playing basketball. I was meeting beautiful girls, and life was fantastic. You know what I mean? But that dream right there was so real. It was as if I was really there in the dream. You know what I mean? I was alive or something.
And had you done that in the past? Did you play basketball and stuff like that?
Big time. Yeah, big time. And it was so real, George, that I felt like I was really there. You know, I've been into this dreaming thing for a long time, and I'd love to find out more about it if I could. But
sounds like a lucid dream, Sarah, doesn't it?
It does sound like a lucid dream. People often describe lucid dreams as being realer than real, and I think that that's often what creates that sense of ecstasy and bliss, is because you feel so utterly present in every sort of cell in your body. And as I was saying before, it's not even every cell in your dream body, it's every atom in the atmosphere of the entire dream world. So it's this enormously expansive, omnipotent feeling that you have in lucid dreaming.
Can you train yourself to dream a particular dream before you go to bed?
Yes, that's dream incubation. So you write down what you want to dream about, you think what you want to dream about. A lot of people have that experience where they're having a really beautiful dream. When they get disturbed, they wake up and then they lie back down in their bed and try to get back into that dream. And often you can do it by, as you're falling asleep, actively thinking about the dream that you want to have and sort of trying to creatively conjure it up and visualize it as you're falling asleep. And then the longer you can do that, the more you can kind of expand and develop that, the more likely you are to get into the dream that you want.
Now, how does this work? I would dream about individuals that had the influence to hire me for a particular job all along my career. And I would think about that person hiring me. I'd go to sleep thinking about that person hiring me. I'd visualize that person. I'd go to sleep. I'd wake up, and the next day I'd get a call from that person saying, hey, we've got an opening, and we think you might be interested in this or that or that. How does that happen?
Brilliant. Well, that's dream magic. That's, one of the most interesting things I find about ancient culture is this absolute, complete acceptance of magic and the power of manifestation, the power of words, desires, thoughts, and intentions to create actual real-world events and things. So I think the dream realm is the ideal incubatory realm to manifest your desires. So like you say, that's a quick, simple, and effective way of getting what you want. Dreaming of what you want can make it happen in your real life.
Was I doing something right? Obviously, I think I was.
Definitely you were doing something right, yeah.
Can it backfire?
I don't know, just perhaps that sort of careful what you wish for.
Exactly.
Right, when it comes to dream manifestation.
Any other books coming out for you?
I'm working on a book now because there's fiction in my book. So it's mostly a study of the dream as medicine in the Western esoteric tradition. But I'm really fascinated in fiction, and I read a lot of fiction. I love novels. I love magical realism. I love Vladimir Nabokov, J.G. Ballard, Hermann Hesse, people like this. And so I did my own dream incubation practices to create 7 stories that basically help to contextualize the information, the sort of dream culture information of a particular era. So there are 7 stories interspersed throughout the book, and they are also accompanied by 7 guided hypnagogic meditations. So these are designed to be a form of sleep hypnosis. So they're audio tracks that will help you to incubate a dream as you're falling asleep.
Sarah, we're getting lots of emails from people who want to know if they can email you through your website. Can they?
Yes, absolutely. I'd be delighted to hear from you.
Absolutely, indeed. And you've got several websites. Do you have one in particular you want to mention?
TheMysteries.org is my main website, and you can find everything that you might want on that website, I think.
Okay, and we've got that linked up at coasttocoastam.com. Our special guest is Sarah Janes. We're going to come back and take final calls with Sarah in just a moment on Coast to Coast. We're sharing your dream stories or questions for her. So we will be back in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM, and then I'll tell you what's in store for tomorrow's show on Coast to Coast AM. And we'll be back with final calls with Sarah Janes in a moment as we talk about dreams and interpretation of them, and we'll get into some of that when we come back with your calls on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you, our final segment with Sarah Janes. Sarah, by the way, thank you for being on the program. This was your first time, and you've done a wonderful job.
Oh, thank you so much, George. It's been a real pleasure. You've actually woken me up a lot earlier than I've been getting up recently, so I appreciate that. I saw the sunrise for the first time in ages this morning.
I love that. Have you ever come across somebody who does not remember any of their dreams? Any of them?
Yes, a lot of people. A lot of people say that. Mm.
Now, how often do you think we really dream, whether we remember them or not?
I think we should be dreaming every night. I mean, usually we have 5 to 7 cycles of REM. The sections closer to waking up tend to be the longest sections, so quite often we can dream for as long as an hour before waking up, and they will often be the dreams we remember most vividly.
Now, does the time you go to sleep have anything to do with your dreams? For example, most of our listeners to the program will probably go to bed after the show. Some of them just woke up to listen to the program several hours ago, but most will go to bed after the show. Does that have anything to do with it, the time you go to bed?
I think so. As I was saying before, like often the environment that we're sleeping in has a big impact on the dream content itself. So if you are a shift worker or you're sleeping during the day, there's more sensory impressions, there's more light, there's more sound, and these things can get incorporated to create very vivid dreams. Often people say that during afternoon naps, they'll have the most vivid lucid dreaming, and that's in part because you're usually a bit more rested in the afternoon, so you're having more shallow sleep, more light sleep, more REM sleep, but also because there's more sensory information coming in, there's more stuff happening in the environment around you, and so those influences are making their way into the dreamscape.
All right, let's go to final calls. First-time caller Lee in the state of Maine. Lee, thanks for holding. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning, George.
Morning. How you been?
Very good. Hey, congratulations on your amazing journey, and hopefully 20 more for you.
Let's go for it. And you be there with me all the way, okay?
God, I hope so, buddy.
All right, my friend, go ahead.
All right, here we go. It was one February night. I loaded up the wood stove, jumped into bed, and I hear this sound down the hallway. It sounds like somebody breathing into a bag, like if you hyperventilate. So I get up and walk down the hallway a little bit, like 10 feet. We have a den. I hear it in there. And I hear it, and I look in, nothing. We have a closet, so I hit the light switch. There was sparks coming out the light switch to my fingertip. So I hear this bag still crunching away in there, and next thing I know, it stops, and I hear like 8 or 9 footsteps running past me towards the kitchen. So I'll go down towards the kitchen and look, put my hands on my knees, and I look towards the kitchen, and we got a big bar there. And it was like a troll, pear-shaped, skinny legs, big feet, hardly any hair, long arms. I started walking towards it, and the thing took off. So I go into the kitchen where the bar was, opened the drawer up, grabbed the flashlight, and the thing was real dim, and I was looking around, so I went to the garage, opened the door up, hit the light switch, more sparks coming out to my finger to the light switch, which it didn't hurt. And I'm looking around, I go in the living room, there's nothing going on. So I go back to bed and lay down, and that was the end of it. Well, got up the next morning and told the wife about it, and she said, "Oh, you was dreaming." So I looked at my nightstand, and that flashlight was there.
Huh.
Well, here's the creepy part. A couple of days later, I was running through my brain again and stuff, and I'm thinking, I said, why in the world did I put my hands on my knees to look? Because from the den to the kitchen straight, there's nothing there. I'm wondering what was blocking my way that I had to bend down and see this.
Strange dreams. How do you interpret these, Sarah? Do you interpret dreams?
A little bit. I mean, I always think the best dream interpreter is the dreamer themselves, because there'll be so many references and motifs that have kind of subtle nuance in their life or mean something specific to them that it doesn't mean to somebody else. But, I mean, I was talking to someone recently, actually, about these kinds of experiences where something's beckoning you out of bed. And I was reading something recently about how carbon monoxide from wood-burning stoves and from faulty boilers is actually implicated in a lot of paranormal ghost activity, that carbon monoxide can create this experience. And I had a friend of mine who they're in New Orleans, and they had a carbon monoxide leak. It was following Hurricane Katrina, and so they were using a generator. And this carbon monoxide had got into their house, and the wife woke up first. She knew she had to wake up for some reason, and then saw that her husband was unconscious and dragged him out onto the landing. She knew instinctively that she had to get him out to fresh air. And I think that quite often with carbon monoxide poisoning, you have this, like, you're being told to wake up. There's some aspect of your higher self knows that there's danger. But this troll sounds like a very fascinating little creature. And an interesting dream as well. So it sounds like you actually did get up and you were sleepwalking and following this creature around.
Does the brain create things like that too, Sarah?
I think that we can create these things, but I think it's, the nature of reality is perhaps more malleable and flexible than we give it credit for.
Let's go to more calls. Let's go to Scott in Costa Mesa, California. Welcome to the show. Hey, Scotty, go ahead.
Hi, Sarah.
Hello, Scott.
Happy all years, I like to say, rather than Happy New Year. Happy all year.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think dreams are just absolutely fascinating, and I just think it's just an amazing gift that we're given to explore that realm. And you were saying, I've got a couple friends who don't remember any dreams, and I kind of feel sorry for them because they're such an adventure, and I feel sometimes like I'm a superhero. And, you could just do anything in your dreams. It's amazing.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and I think that this is why I'm so passionate about trying to encourage other people to dream, doing sleep hypnosis. I've got some sleep hypnosis videos on my website, actually, because it is surprisingly easy to influence dream content. And the thing is, I guess, if you don't have a history of dreaming and getting a lot out of dreaming, you don't know what you're missing. So I'm always trying to encourage people to do like practical exercises and do sleep hypnosis, because lots of people come to my workshop saying they never remember dreams, and then just taking people on an imaginal sort of guided hypnagogic meditation with visual ideas and with intention helps them to have a better experience of the dreamscape. And, something like that can be really inspiring. I think that you're right. It's the ultimate creative, expressive, joyful experience, like a really beautiful dream.
Let's go to our truck driver, Byron, out there in Indiana. Welcome to the show. Hi, Byron.
Hello, Mr. Norrie. Congratulations on your 20 years, and I think that I speak for all of our fellow drivers out there that you definitely keep us entertained and, most importantly, awake when we're driving at night.
That's great. Thank you, Byron.
Thank you for what you do.
Sure thing.
Sarah, question about most current dreams that I usually have are typically where I find myself physically, and it may sound stupid, but physically fighting. And say I'm fighting a guy, an example, and, I'm getting my butt kicked. But when it comes to me defending myself, I find myself almost being held back from punching back, and where in the dream I have the ability that I can actually hit the guy or hurt the guy, and somehow I can't, as if something is holding me back or stopping me from hitting the individual that I'm fighting. Is there an explanation to that?
How do you explain that one, Sarah?
Well, I've had similar dreams to this as well, and the key for me when it comes to a fighting dream is to just transmute and alchemize that feeling of anger and fighting, because when you remember that every single aspect of the dream is an aspect of yourself, you don't really want to be fighting yourself. You want to love yourself and to accept yourself and integrate those shadow aspects back into yourself to be whole and to evolve. So, often people get into lucid dreaming because as children they have nightmares and they learn that it's a nightmare and they can choose to wake up, or they might choose to fight the scary element in the dream, or to change and transform the scary element of the dream into something lovely and beautiful. So I think the key here is remembering that you're in a dream and recognizing the fact that this character that you're fighting is an aspect of yourself, and to accept, to love. And you'll probably find that if you can create this feeling within yourself, that the nature of that other character will change as well.
On one of our wild card lines, Nancy's with us in Boston, Massachusetts. Hello, Nancy.
Hi. Thanks for taking the call.
Thank you.
When I was really young, I used to dream every night, and I would dream as if I had taken 3 books, ripped them up, glued them back together. Didn't matter what the plot was. It was fine. And that stopped. And then I've had a couple of lucid dreams in my life, and that stopped. And I had a dream about 10 years after I graduated college that I'd given birth to my then my boyfriend's child and given it up for adoption to him. But the dream, I had it about 4 times. And it was so real to me, I actually had to ask a friend, had I had a baby that I didn't know about, that I had amnesia through or something. And I just don't know why I don't dream. And now I don't dream anymore. So I don't know what's going on. So,
I think quite often when we know ourselves and understand ourselves, there's like less cryptic dreaming occurrences because we've worked ourselves out. I think there's definitely an element of that whereby as we get older, we become more aware of who we are. We've got less to work out. We're less puzzled by the things that happen in our lives. But that being said, because dreams are so creative and beautiful and joyful, they're so life-enriching. They're worth continuing to work with. So I would suggest practicing some sleep hypnosis and doing some guided hypnagogic meditation. And I've got some on my website, but there are lots out there in the world. And just especially using sleep hypnosis and meditation during the hypnagogic process, so as you're falling asleep, can help to seed your subconscious with suggestions, with like visual ideas, motifs, with scenery. I read a lot of novels before I go to bed, and I always find that those things find their way into dreaming. And, having sort of passions and hobbies and creative avenues to explore in the dream realm is just great.
Thanks, Nancy. Let's go to Kate in Lake St. Louis, Missouri. Hi, Katie.
Hi, you two. How are you?
Great. Hope you are, too.
Thank you so much. My first time calling. Sarah, you're awesome. I really appreciate your knowledge. And Mr. Norrie, my grandma introduced me to you a long time ago, and I've been listening since I was like 6 years old.
Yay, Granny. All right, thanks, Katie.
So I have always dreamt very vividly, and I have reoccurring dreams, 2 specifically. And I started that when I was about 10 years old. And it is in all black and gray, and I'm sitting on a couch, and I don't move. I just look over, and then this all red spider just climbs up on the cushion right next to me, and we just look at each other.
Big one or a small one?
Oh, probably about as big as a softball.
That's a pretty good sized spider.
Yeah.
What causes spider dreams? We've only got a minute left, Sarah. What causes spider dreams?
Well, I always think of spiders as being quite lucky. Do you feel the spider is threatening in any way?
No, it just looks at me.
Just stares at her.
I think there's something about spiders in terms of your territory and your domain and being on your web and being sensitive to everything that's happening in the world. I think spiders are really powerful symbols of being the master of your domain.
Interesting take. Sarah, we are out of time. The clock has ticked. Full information on your events on your website, and the people can sign up for these training programs, I'm sure?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is themysteries.com. Oh, sorry, .org. Themysteries.org.
And the name of the book, Initiation into Dream Mysteries. I think dreaming's fascinating. Let's all go dream today. And what's the simplest technique to remember a dream? Is there one Two or three words you could tell us?
The simplest technique is to set an intention of what you want to dream about before you go to sleep. Write down exactly what you want to dream about. And when you wake up in the morning, record as many details as possible from your dream, and then just create that kind of feedback system between your waking life and dreaming life.
That's the way to do it. Thank you again, Sarah. For Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Alex Lonehood, Sean Ladouceur, Stephanie Smith, Chris Burrows, Tim Badal, George Knapp, and Ian Punnett, I'm George Norrie, somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone.